Deepwater Legends is presented by Magic Tail Outfitters, precision tackle for legendary catches. For over 100 years, Cortland Line has been designing and manufacturing the world's most innovative fly line and braided fishing line.
Welcome to Deepwater Legends. Today we have Brooks Robinson from Cortland Braid. Hey Brooks, what's going on, man?
Hey
How
man,
are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Hey, we're doing great. I'm Nate, and this
I'm
is
I'm Troy.
and we're here, and we're gonna find out everything that you guys have to offer, and what specifically people should be looking for when it comes to braid for their lines, whether they're fishing offshore or fishing inshore or freshwater and so forth. You guys have a lot of different options from hollow core all the way down to stuff people are using for trout, and we're interested to talk to you and find out everything that your company has to use. I've been on a lot of boats, and a lot of times we're using your braid, and I, as an angler, want to know, like, hey, what makes braid the best? Because I don't want to get into a situation where the fish got away when it's something I could have been able to um, choose a different product or something like that to make sure that I have the best possible gear. Because although braided fishing line comes at a cost, it's one of the cheapest costs when it comes to offshore fishing specifically. And I just hate the fact of, like, hey, that trophy marlin or tuna or anything that you're chasing gets away due to something like this.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and Portland in general?
Yeah, so I've been employed at Cortland. I think this will be my 13th year coming up. April 1st is when I started, I believe 13 years ago. I started at Cortland. I was hired in a manufacturing position actually to make fly lines. So we manufacture braided fly fishing, or sorry, braided line for inshore, offshore, saltwater, freshwater, and we also manufacture fly fishing products. I actually was hired 13 years ago in the manufacturing department for fly fishing. I worked there for about a year and a half, and was asked to work about an hour or two a day on social media. So I took that over, and then that led to managing our pro staff and ambassador team. I had eventually gone to the social media pro staff management full time, left manufacturing. I started doing trade shows for Cortland probably 11 years ago. So, ICAST, IFTD, all the regional shows. I manage all of those from, booth setup perspective, shipping, drayage, all that stuff. And then just right into product development, with a small team of guys. I have eventually, taken over as the Cortland team lead in product development. I still heavily rely on, five or six guys in the office in the plant every day when it comes to that, as well as, pro staff ambassadors and what have you. So that's where I'm at today. Product development. I still manage trade shows. I still work closely with our pro staff and ambassadors. I'm also the Northeast and Mid Atlantic sales rep for Cortland Line. I also cover Eastern Canada. I wear a lot of hats at Cortland. We're a small company. We have about 30 employees internally at the plant. So I work at the plant and the office every day. We're located in Cortland, New York. We're in upstate New York. We're about a half hour south of Syracuse. If you were to put a dot right in the middle of upstate New York, you would find Cortland. So we've been in business since 1915. The company was created as a sporting goods company then. It had morphed into a little bit more on the fishing side prior to World War II. In World War II, we actually took government contracts to build braided products for America in the World War II efforts. So I'm talking parachute cord, arm cord, bootlaces, candle wicks. Yeah, candle wicks, because you're talking what, 1940 something right in there. So we had taken over that, and then after the war, we had obviously switched back to fishing line, and some of the original fishing lines were invented, created in Cortland, New York, from Cortland. You're talking the OG Dacrons from back in the day, monofilament. Some of those we still make to this day. Obviously, time has evolved, and the technology has advanced since then. So I think in 1950 we had invented the PVC coated fly line. So there's been just an insane history with Cortland since 1915. I was actually born in the city of Cortland in 1987. So when I had a job opportunity, 13 years ago, I mean, I was a hardcore angler. I was maybe a year out of college. I was pretty much a dipshit, just fishing all the time. So I had this option to start at Cortland and work for a fishing company in my hometown. And I just, how do you say no to that? So, things have progressed a lot. Um, Ton of advancements in braided line, ton of advancements in fly fishing. Things have evolved, in the last, 110 years or however long it's been. So, yeah, I wear a lot of hats at Cortland, uh, specifically and mostly just product development and sales. So that's kind of where we're at today.
So, being entrusted with such a high profile job there, it's fair to say that you must have some extensive fishing experience yourself. Um, can you dig into a little bit of that? Like, where do you hang your hat when it comes to fishing? Do you have any specifics like, hey, this is what I'm the very best at targeting? This
Sure.
is what else I like to go after?
No, it your question is warranted. I mean, I grew up on a small lake, probably 10 minutes north of Cortland. I grew up fishing, largemouth bass, panfish, right? And my dad would take me trout fishing in rivers and trout fishing, or sorry, salmon and steelhead fishing in bigger rivers. We're about a half an hour south of Lake Ontario. So we fish all those tributaries that flow into Lake Ontario, which get lake run fish. That's really how I grew up fishing. So I was obsessed with fishing, since I was whatever 3, 4 years old, right? And always an outdoors guy, hunted, fished for forever. And then I really got into just the love of salmon and steelhead fishing. That's really how I ended up getting a job at Cortland. I was, somewhat unemployed at painting houses, fishing all the time, and that's when Facebook really started ramping up, probably in like 2007, 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. Pretty much once the general public was allowed on Facebook, because previous to that, it was you had to have a college email to be on Facebook. I'm posting photos of fish all the time, and this guy was at Cortland, and they had a position open, and he's like, "I see you fish all the time. You're local. Do you want a job?" Long and short of it, that's really where my experience was before I was in Cortland. Was a little bit of freshwater bass fishing conventionally, a lot of fly fishing for lake run fish, salmon and steelhead. And it wasn't really till I got to Cortland that I experienced this whole other realm and world of fishing. I'm talking just saltwater fishing in general, inshore, offshore fishing. I'll, you know, an example is when they gave me the rights to manage Cortland social media. I was, getting pictures from pro staff, sales reps, internal guys. I didn't know the difference between a redfish and a snook. That was 12 years ago. I was like, is this, be honest with you, I didn't, you know what I mean? I just didn't. And you have to start somewhere in your fishing career, right?
And you
So,
have to
100%.
say, probably a vast majority of our people are saltwater anglers, but just numbers wise, bass fishing is by far outnumbering saltwater fishing just because most people don't live around the coast.
well, bass fishing is so accessible, right? It's in all 50 states, maybe 49, excluding Alaska. I don't know. Maybe there's a bass up there or not. So that's why bass fishing is so huge, right? Um, So, long and short of it is I had no experience in saltwater. I didn't know a snook from a redfish, and then there's a striped bass, there's an albie. I remember the first time I saw this picture of a mahi, and they're like, "Yeah, they got this in New Jersey." I'm like, "What do you mean you got this in New Jersey? I thought those were only in Florida." So I had just progressed, and learned so much over the years of receiving this info from people and social media, and I just soaked it up like a sponge, and I just kind of thought I knew what I knew and realized I didn't know anything. And a lot has to do with like the products we make and how good they are, of just being able to swallow your pride and realize you got to rely on people when you're not in that situation all the time, right? I'm 4.5 hours from the coast. I rely a lot on product development and the products we make at Cortland, inshore, offshore, saltwater, from our pro staff guys, our ambassadors, guys that are on the water. I only make it to the coast, maybe 3, 4 times a year. Some of that's just inshore striped bass fishing. I get lucky to go, canyon fishing on big boats, inshore bluefin tuna fishing, sure. But even from a product development standpoint of just freshwater, Rocky Mountain trout fishing, peacock bass in Florida, North Georgia trout fishing, Arkansas, like there's just so much, and that's just the U.S., right? You have, the Indian Ocean, the Seychelles for GTs, and like there's so much stuff out there that you got to really love what you do and fish and just it's what I do, man. It's all I know. It's what I do. I soak it up every day. I learn a lot. I keep my mouth shut. I swallow my pride, and I just learn. You know what I mean? And those things help you progress. As an industry employee overall, and then from a product development standpoint for a company like Cortland, you're able to really come out with some unique stuff. And long and short of it, to answer your question, is I had a freshwater background. I learned a lot in saltwater, probably starting 11 years ago when I took over social media, and I've just been obsessed with inshore, offshore, saltwater, and really everything, man. So long-winded answer, but I just had to get that out there that I don't know everything. I started from scratch. I get questions for Cortland customer service all the time, and guys ask the most basic stuff. And there's a lot of guys out there like, how does this guy not know that? Well, you got to start from somewhere. You know what I mean? So I take pride in answering those questions, and so does the crew at Cortland. You have to start from somewhere. I know you guys started from somewhere at some point in time. You know what I mean? Not
We're
everyone gets
from
to grow
rural
up.
Pennsylvania, so we're
Yeah,
right up your alley.
Fishing for
yeah,
trout and bass.
And then later on in life, just really pounding the saltwater fish and being like, hey, we have to move to the coast so we can chase this thing full time.
Yeah.
But
no, it's
we're right
it's
there
true.
with
Like
you.
I know you guys are good friends with Dante from Magic Tail Outfitters. Like,
Yes, and
not
shout
all of
out to
us.
Dante for
Yeah,
connecting us, because having you on here to explain to everyone else about the line, like you and I have had an hour-long phone call the other day, and I had a lot of questions, and I was like, oh my gosh, I never even would have thought to ask this. And I reached out to a bunch of other friends in the industry, and I was like, hey, what can we ask this guy? Like, what do you guys want to learn about braid that like the regular guy just isn't in a position to be able to find out? You have a lot of people that are really invested in the sport, and line is one of the most, if not the most
Most.
important feature that you have, because without it, or with line that's subpar, like the fish is going to get away, and
agree,
unfortunately it's going to be the big one,
agree.
and that's what keeps people up at night.
But what my point was with Dante is, not all of us get to grow up as Dante's son fishing on an offshore boat when they're 4 years old and
The little
covered in,
D is awesome, man.
you know
Did
what
you
I
see
mean?
him
So it's like
catching
That's
those
the
marlin the
life.
other day?
that kid's he's going to be an encyclopedia by the time he's 21 years old. You know what I mean? So you got to start somewhere. Sometimes you're 22, sometimes you're 4, and you know it's just what it is. So yeah, that's the extent of my fishing experience. Like I said, grew up in freshwater, really learned the saltwater game working at Cortland. Have been obsessed with the saltwater game, specifically tuna fishing, specifically offshore fishing. Um, I thought my favorite thing in the world to do was to target tarpon on the fly in the Florida Keys, which is just like the most magnificent thing you've ever seen with that, seafoam green emerald water, 6, 7 foot long fish eating, a tiny fly this big. I've been fortunate enough to do that, 6, 7 times and had some just insane days on the water. I have multiple 100-pound fish on the fly. I'm spoiled. I'm very fortunate. But when I discovered tuna fishing, specifically bluefin tuna fishing, I'm like, no, this is the shit. The tarpon thing is cool. The only thing tuna don't do is jump when they're hooked. Uh, but everything about it is just like I'm obsessed. I watch the tuna shows. I think about it all the time, and just I can't wait for the next time I'm on the water to be able to do that.
I spent a couple years down in Naples, and I feel the same way. When I was there, I was like, it doesn't get any better. And then I moved back to New Jersey, and it was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine not having this fishery here. A lot of people are quick to trash on New Jersey, and it's like, well, you obviously don't fish or hunt because
Yeah,
it's
there's a
outstanding
difference
for both.
between North Jersey, just outside of New York City, and the suburbs. My wife's staring at me because she's from North Jersey right now. I'm about to roast them. And then like coastal New Jersey and the beaches and the fishing, and New Jersey's just incredible state overall. And what people don't know is there's a whole part of North Jersey, like north of I-80, that's horse country, trout fishing, like gorgeous mountains, just an incredible place to be. New Jersey is essentially it's a suburb of New York City. But the fishing in New Jersey is just I mean, it is the Florida of the North. You can catch a striped bass 12 months out of the year. Typically, April through December are your core months. You can catch mahi. You can catch tuna. It's New Jersey's insane. It's just an incredible place to be a sales rep for a fishing company. It's an incredible place to be a fisherman. The access to the water, the inlets, the bays. It's the real deal, man. It's just gets a bad name sometimes, probably from the Jersey Shore show on MTV. But other than that, it's a good place to be.
Absolutely. And with that, let's cut into a couple products that you guys offer. I'm personally a big user of hollow core. I know you guys have two different hollow core lines
Hmm.
to really satisfy the anglers. What are the big differences between your C16 and your C12? And what do you recommend that anglers go out and do and choose ultimately?
No, it's a good question. We just introduced in 2025, really like late 24, the C12. In order to do that, it was a spinoff of our ultra premium C16 hollow core, which is very well known around the industry. It is I'm not just saying this because I work there, but it is the best hollow core in the world, hands down. It is the easiest splicing. It is the most durable. It is the smoothest. It's the longest lasting hollow core that you can possibly buy in the world, regardless of where you are. So the C16 and the C12, the major differences between the two is like what is C16, what is C12? The C stands for carriers, right? And 16 stands for 16 carriers, C12 stands for 12, meaning like a lot of braid right now, everyone has 8 carrier braid, right? 8 carrier means there's 8 individual fibers constructed in that braid. So C16 has 16 individual fibers and C12 has 12. Okay, so that's the biggest difference between the two of those. The C16 has been around probably a year or two before I got to Cortland. We have just refined it since I took over product development with tweaks to making a little bit more spliceable, slightly better coating, addition of blue and chartreuse in the color range, and then adding 40, 60, and 300 to the C16 lineup from what already existed. So the C12 we introduced last year, and the main difference or the main reason why we did it is from a price point perspective. Making braid in upstate New York out of US fiber, Spectra fiber, is expensive.
Made in the
The way we
USA,
make
baby.
Yeah, but it's the real deal. Um, it's not from overseas. It's not from overseas or some other plant. We just put our label on it. Like you can come to Cortland, New York, at the Cortland plant. I will take you for a tour. And I said, these are all the braiders right here. These are the 100 braiders that are making C16 right now. And you're like, I get it. There's real people behind what goes into making this product. So it's from a quality perspective, it's a super high quality because of the base material we start with. We start with an expensive fiber. It is the most expensive fiber you can get. It is the most durable you can get. If you aren't getting 5 or 6 years out of your hollow core, you're not fishing Cortland hollow core. I know these guys in some shops I deal with, I'm spooling up every year or every other year. you shouldn't be doing that if you're paying a premium price for a hollow core. If you're buying some dirt cheap hollow core, you're not going to be paying for that product in the long run with how many times you need it spliced at the shop or yourself. But the base product and the base material, it is of the super highest quality that you can actually get. So in addition to that, the way that we braid is very unique. We have specific braiders dedicated to those products alone. That's what makes the product so spliceable and easy to serve a needle inside it, for fluoro and mono top shots, and be able to do that year after year, fish after fish. I actually have a captain in Cape Cod, Matt Paracchio from Tighten Up Charters. He also owns a company called Bluefin Plus. He's on year 7 of 200-pound C16 hollow with well over 100 giant bluefin tuna on it.
That's
And
awesome.
he had asked me last year, he's like, I'm having a little bit of trouble splicing it. He's like, I think it's just so salt packed and just drawn out from fish. He goes, I got up about 2 feet inside the needle. He goes, let's run it. And he sent me a picture like 3 days later of like 4 dead giants at the market. And he's like, it still works. So we're on, I think this is year 7 or year 8 with that. So my point is if you're going to spend the money on hollow core, make sure you're spending money on proper hollow core that's done correctly, that is made to last multiple years. You guys had mentioned, how important braid is on boats. And, sometimes when you look at all your setups, right, and your boat and your ice and your bait and everything, sometimes that line, even if it's the most premium product, can be the least expensive thing on that boat, but the most important thing on that boat. I remember fishing in the White Marlin Open one year. The bill we got for ice just to go out on day 2 was insane. I'm like, what, you know what I mean? So when I would sell tackle shops, premium hollow core, they would balk at the price. And I would look outside and I'm like, you're sitting in a marina with, 60 million, $2 million plus boats out there. I'm pretty sure that this product, between fuel and ice and bait and rods and reels, is in the long term, year after year, going to be probably the cheapest thing on that boat. So price was always a factor, is kind of my point and where I was going. This is, price was always a big thing with that item, right? When you just have a name like Cortland, which hasn't been in the saltwater space for a very long time, even though we've been in business since 1915. I'm not oblivious that we've really kind of burst onto the scene here in certain aspects. People are like, oh, I've heard of Cortland hollow core. Oh my gosh, the price, right? Well, guys that know, and they buy premium hollow core, and they don't balk it because they know what's good. They know from the OGs and the really good captains how good this product is. But it's typically the guys that want to go from solid braid to hollow core that are a little bit on the sticker shock side, or the influx of overseas inexpensive products that are coming out of any place other than the US, right? So we needed
Yeah,
to,
bleaches in one trip. You
yeah,
go out there, you get the paint on your fingers, gets all over your boat.
exactly. So we needed to come up with a way to graduate anglers into Cortland from solid braid into hollow core, with the ultimate goal of them progressing into an ultra premium product of C16, because they understand the benefits of purchasing a proper braid that's going to last them forever. So what we did is we tweaked the carriers from a 16 to a 12. And in order to do that, but maintain the brake strength, right? When you go from a 16 carrier, I'll use 200-pound, for example. When you go from a 16 carrier 200-pound braid to a 12 carrier 200-pound braid, each one of those little deniers, they're called, the carriers, the individual fibers, those have to be larger across the board so that that braid breaks at 200 pounds, right? You can't just go from 16 to 12. You're going to end up breaking probably like 130, 140 pounds. So each one of those deniers is slightly larger on the 12 carrier than it is the 16. And some people might be like, well, it's got to be a thicker braid. It's not, because what we're able to do from product development standpoint is we're able to tweak the pick count, which is how many times the braid crosses itself in an inch, right? How many times those braiders go around in a given inch. So what we did is we elongated the pick count and we loosened up the pick count. So when that braid is drawn out flat, it's actually the same size as C16, but it's only 12 carriers. Each individual denier is slightly larger than the 16 carrier denier. The wall thickness on the inside is almost the same because those deniers are slightly wider, they're slightly larger. So we were able to cut down from a 16 to a 12 carrier. And in doing that, those deniers that are actually a little bit larger are a little bit less expensive than the thinner ones. The only downfall from going from a 16 to a 12 would be the wall thickness, or sorry, the inside wall is not as perfect as a 16. So the needle may have a tendency to pop out the side if you don't go straight into it when you're serving a needle inside of it. That would be the only downfall. But if you're solid at splicing, even decent, you wouldn't even notice it. And the other thing is from a 16 to a 12, like the smoothness is just, it's slightly different, right? When you have 16 individual fibers versus 12, I don't want to say it's rough because it's not. The smoothness is just a little bit different. So it's really the only difference between the two is the carriers, the pick count or weave, and the smoothness. Even though they're both glass smooth, the 16 is just like flawless though. And the only other thing I would say is the difference really between the two is the sizes of top shot, mono or fluoro that you can put in the 12 versus the 16. The 12 carrier top shot availability is slightly narrowed versus a 16. Like a 16 will accept very large sizes of mono and fluoro into the hollow and very small sizes into that same size without slipping or added insertion length. Like typically 4 feet's like that's pretty much good on C16. I told you my buddy, he only went up 2 feet and caught 4 more giants on it. So typically 4 feet's probably the most common. You don't need to go any further up inside of a C16 carrier braid with a super thin mono or fluoro because there's 16 individual fibers with a super high pick count biting onto that braid. It's like a finger trap puzzle, if you guys have ever done that before, right? The harder you pull, the stronger that braid bites down onto that mono. So with the 12 carrier, it's a little bit more narrowed. So if you have 80-pound C12, it's going to accept 100-pound no problem and probably 130 no problem. For example, like a 130 C16, you can put 150, 180, 200 into it. So it allows you to expand the range of what you're going to put in there for a top shot, where C12 is, 80 to 80, 80 to 100, 80 to 130, it's a little bit more narrowed. So I don't want to say there's any downfalls to it. There's just so many more positive characteristics in C16 than there is C12. But that's the difference in the price. That's what you're paying for. If you are transitioning from solid to a hollow, you're not really sure if you want to just go all in, C12 is for you. That is it, it's for you. It's the price is correct, the performance is correct, the durability, the longevity is correct. If you're there for a while and you're like, I know what I got here. I'm ready to respool. There's a lot of top water anglers for tuna that throw C16 for popping rigs. Those guys all run C16. It's super smooth. Doesn't wind knot. It doesn't curl under a ton of pressure. It needs to get respooled. So those guys that are ready to graduate after C12 or a cheaper hollow core, like C16 is your pinnacle. That is your, Shimano Tiagras. That's your Stella. That's your Mercedes. That's your Ferrari, right? That is like when you know your shit and you're ready to go fish in tournaments
Play with
and
the
you're
big
like, I want
boys.
nothing but the best on my boat. I'm not going to cut any corners. That's what C16 is. When you're making a jump from solid to hollow, or maybe you're just on a budget, which is totally fine. You know what I mean? If you're like, man, I spent a lot of money on the center console, a lot of money on fuel, rods and reels. Like, I know I got to get all my conventional reels spooled up. I don't have a ton of dough, but I know I need this. C12 is for you. That is why we created it. is our goal to get people, one, fishing Cortland as opposed to the overseas garbage that continues to influx our market, and two, to get guys to graduate from solid to hollow and eventually understand what an ultra premium product is and get them there. So that's really the differences between the two. They're both incredible products. They're both made right in Cortland, New York. You have your entry level, price point level hollow, and you have your Ferrari. I know what I'm doing. I want nothing but the best on my boat. That's what you're buying. So that's really the differences between the two, and who or why you would choose one of those two options.
And realistically, anybody that's making these 75, 100-mile trips out here to the fishing grounds, then tying on a $100 spreader bar or $75 lure, you're crazy for risking it on like a lesser braid. Just because when that fish comes, and it will come, it's going to strike the rod that is least prepared. Whether it's the
every
smallest
time.
reel, it's the weakest line, or a line that you thought you wrapped around a crab pot and didn't change, or a knot that you didn't change out, or a swivel clip, never fails. That's why we specifically cut the swivels off every single trip and retie and re-leader and re check the lines and make sure they're good to go every trip with new hooks and new baits. And every time a bait's not swimming right, we pull it, because all of our preparation and money and time spent in going out here to fish, like that's the least expensive part. Like all week long, I just think about like, oh, this weekend I'm going out there. You're crazy for like just kind of cheaping out, just being like, oh, like that bait's going to be good for a couple hours, or hey, this line's going to be good for another year or two. When
It's
like,
funny you mentioned that. Line is probably what I've seen, and just because I'm hyper focused on it, because I sell line and that's what we develop. Line is almost like one of the last things really people focus on, and I'm trying to find the words, but
I'd say hooks
um,
too, line and hooks, man. I've
line
been
and
on
line
so
and
many
line and
boats where
hooks,
people are
right?
like, hey, I got these hooks on Amazon. You look at the
Yeah,
box and
so
it's like, hey,
like
what
line,
that kind of is this?
yeah, like line is it's like an afterthought. Like I feel like in today's market for your average consumer, and I don't mean average in terms of you're an average fisherman, just your general guy, not your hardcore captains, right? Line is line, but it's not just line, right? It's weird. It's like the last thing guys think about, right? You spend all this time and money and effort. You pay a marina, you pay a docking fee, you flush your outboards, you get, all your shit tuned up. Your
Parking
rods
fees
are,
at boat ramps now. Thanks, Florida.
yeah. So like how much time, money, and everything you've invested into this trip, right? And reels and bait, it's insane. And I realized this specifically when I started doing these regional trade shows. I would work my tackle shops, I would work in their booth, and man, these consumers would buy these, Shimano Stratic, or Penn Authority, or Shimano Stella, and they just really didn't care about what line they were putting on it. And not that it wasn't my line. There's a lot of good braids out there, and I will admit that there's a lot of solid braids, but there's a lot of shitty braids out there too. There's a lot of
Yes,
guys
King.
that will go buy, you know, a $900 Van Stall, $1,000 Stella, and the shop's just
$25
like,
roll line.
yeah, they're like, yeah, we'll spool you up with 65-pound solid braid, and they don't even say like, well, what is it? You know what I mean? And line is like an afterthought, and it's painful because that's what I make and that's what I sell. But in some ways, like you could say everything's the most important, right? The fuel you put in your boat is the most important. The ice you put in your boat's the most important. I mean, line is the only thing that connects you to the fish. Period. Okay, fluoro, mono, top shot, and the hook. Agree. Totally agree. But consumers, I think there's just been such an influx in, like, everyone makes braid round. People that companies that sold rods and reels 5, 6, 7 years ago that never made braid, all of a sudden they have a braid. It's just made overseas with their name on it. There's a couple really good solid companies that are made in the States And there's a couple brands that are made overseas. There's a lot of braids coming out of Japan that are really high quality. Um, those guys are hardcore anglers out of there. But 50% of what's out there right now is just absolute shit. It's just like it's sold on Amazon. It's sold, here and there. There's a lot of marketing hype around it on social media, and just do not fall for that. It would be my number one advice to consumers or anyone that's listening is just don't just see this hype reel on Instagram. Just like, I'm going to try that. Like, talk to your tackle shop, talk to the guys that know, reach out to you guys, right? Like, if you see that there's a captain like on your Instagram, you're like, I know this guy charters every day, message him and be like, hey, what braid do you use? I'm only going for sea trout inshore. The guy's going to tell you, like, get this, right? Don't just fall for, there's so much marketing right now. We live in such a digital space that, and it's the same for every industry, right? Shoes, golf, all the bullshit. But fishing line is just so much junk out there. And, eventually those customers will realize it wasn't the right decision. They'll come around and they'll gravitate to Cortland or a couple of the other really good brands that are out there. But yeah, fishing line is very important. I think it's one of the least sought after or mentally thought of products that anglers really um, think about, and they should be thinking about it. Of course, I'm a little partial to that, but even if I wasn't doing product development or selling fishing line, I would, knowing what I know now, it would be my number one focus. And I design, fly rods, I design fly reels, I fish conventional rods, I fish conventional reels. Rods and reels, they're so advanced now today than what they were 10 and 20 years ago. You could have a solid reel and a solid rod, and it's going to get the job done. Now, I'm not talking about high end, offshore fishing or high end, high speed drag fishing on spin gear for tuna. Like I'm just talking, redfish, snook, striped bass, freshwater species. You got a solid reel and a solid rod, it's going to get the job done. But if your line sucks, it's just like it's worthless. You know what I mean? Line is probably the one thing that I would never cheap out on, knowing what I know now, having worked in the industry for 13 years.
And not to mention, the cheap stuff is just so much thicker. Sometimes we go out and buy like cheap stuff just to test it and just be like, hey, how's this hold up to like the legit products? And line is one of those things specifically that you get it and it's like, this is like a shoelace. Like you get some 100-pound cheap stuff off of Amazon. That stuff's thick.
Yeah, there's variations in diameter. There's also line that you would buy and you're like, wow, this is really thin, but there's no abrasion resistance to it, right? So it goes both ways. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that our line is the thinnest on the market. There's some sizes that are equal to, there's some sizes that are larger. When it comes to hollow core specifically, we are, I would say, thinner or equal to across the board than anything you will find on the market. That's one of the things that I did over the last 18 months when designing C12 is that product has to fit into a price point to combat the overseas stuff. So I made sure that that product was equal to or thinner across every size versus the competition, that it broke equal to or higher across every size versus the competition, and that the max needle size that you could put in to each size of their braid, I made sure that that same needle size went into our braid much easier. So I made sure that in order to come out with this product, we check all three boxes, including the price. And that's the same thing that goes for C16. When it comes to solid braid and the master braid, which we can get into, it is a hardcore, long-term abrasion resistance product, epic for backing, bottom fishing, day in, day out. It's not super stiff out of the box where it needs a little bit of a break-in. It's not super limp where it's going to have wind knots. It resists bleeding and fading like no other. We have a unique way of dyeing our braid, which we can get into. I won't say that that product is the quietest in the guides, the longest distance casting braid, and the thinnest braid. It's absolutely not. It's built for what I just described it to be. A day in, day out, super durable, beat the shit out of it, throw it in mangroves, let it run underneath the boat, put it around dock pillars. That's what it's built to do. It's a braid that you put on your, you're like, I'm not going to have any issues with this. This is what I'm doing. Now, if you're a hardcore surf angler looking for distance, probably not the braid for you, but I got one coming in the next year or two that we're working on right now. So there's some advantages to fishing Cortland in certain products, and there's some products that are our competition that are a little bit better for certain aspects of fishing, whether it's distance or slickness or smoothness or quietness. It's every product has its own beneficial segment in where it's going to get used in fishing and in the market. We do, other brands do. I could tell you competitive wise how other brands are better than Cortland or their downfalls than Cortland. You know what I mean? So I think the most important thing is just being honest with yourself as far as the products you make and where you stand in comparison to everyone else. And don't bullshit your customers, whether it's an end consumer or a dealer. It comes back to bite you. And I think guys appreciate the honesty.
Now that we have the hollow core done, I think before we jump into the master braid and really get into like, hey, vertical jigging, popping, all these other great features, I think I have a question a lot of people are wondering. What color do you guys sell the most of? And is there any value to that? Do you feel that like, hey, white or blue or green or yellow is better than another, other than for visibility when you're trolling? What do you see most people buying specifically, and for what applications?
So for hollow core, our number one seller far and away is white.
I'm a
But
white
I
guy
mean,
myself,
it's 10 to 1.
and it can't
Um,
bleed.
yeah, you know what? Bleeding and we can have a discussion on like what makes Cortland maybe bleed or fade less than everyone else, right? And there's some technical stuff that I think your listeners need to know, and I have the answers to. But white far and away, I think that because the coatings that get applied to braid for coloring uh, restrict a little bit of spliceability. White also is very visible in low light, especially for like live bait fishing. For those scenarios when you're adrift, live bait fishing. So white far and away, I would say blue is number two, and chartreuse would be number three. For solid braid, and I'll go over fresh and saltwater. Freshwater, I would say by far moss green is number one seller. Probably blue number two, white number three, yellow number four, and then we actually make a super cool color called bronze. It's like a bronze color, which is super popular in like your tannic colored water in the upper Midwest, where it's got that kind of amber type tint to it. It camos itself right in. For saltwater, blue and white, number one. It's probably a 50-50 split between the two of those. Yellow and moss green are probably 3 and 4, 50 split between those, and bronze being the third, as it's just not dedicated to be. Guys fish bronze in saltwater because they want something unique and different on their reel, or they might color code their reels based on pound test for certain various reasons. So it really depends on like what your application is with color, right? For hollow core, you're either trolling, you're casting top water, or you're live bait fishing. Like those are the three purposes of hollow core. For inshore, offshore, saltwater, like deep drop swordfish reels on LPs, you're talking yellow so that you can see the way your drift is going when you're either fishing at night or daytime sword fishing. Same thing with tile fishing on some of those electric reels. Blue, maybe because it conceptually blends in with the water. Don't really know. White because it is visible, but it's not high vis like yellow. Moss green because it's super dark and it kind of blends in certain scenarios. So it's really like, what are you doing? Are you targeting blitzing striped bass? Are you targeting albies? Are you targeting, tuna trolling? Are you casting a tuna? Are you vertical jigging tuna? Are you fishing mahi around lobster pots, right? So like all that stuff comes into play when choosing a color for certain scenarios and certain watercolors. And some of it's just preference. Some of it's how cool it looks on a reel. Like look at all these different colored reels from like Avid or Accurate, or it's like I'm gonna spend $1,000 on this, Accurate or Avid reel, and it's blue. I'm gonna put some blue braid on it, and that's cool because we got blue. We do a custom color run of purple, seafoam green, pink, and orange. You'd be surprised how much we sell that stuff for guys that just want something different on their reel. But your core colors: moss green, yellow, white, and blue. Those are the 4 top biggest colors, and that's not just us. That's around the country, because there's certain specific reasons why you would fish that color in certain scenarios for certain fish, in certain applications. So I hope that answered your question. I know it was a long-winded answer, but
Oh yeah. Do you guys
it just
ever have any plans
depends.
on like a depth finder color, like
Yeah.
something
So
that changes?
we used to manufacture a metered braid. That machine was so outdated when I had really got into the product development role that it was more costly than it made sense to continue. That's a custom product that needs to get built. You can't just buy a metering machine off Amazon or eBay. So that's something that we're working on. I would say for Cortland, the next steps would be a full range of an 8 carrier braid. I'm talking from 5 pound up through 100 or 130 for whatever inshore, offshore, saltwater, freshwater fishing, and then a metered braid for vertical jigging. You're not the first person to ask for it, and you're not the last until we come out with it. I'm not oblivious that we need a vertical jigging braid specifically for tuna fishing, suspended fish. Bottom fishing, not so much. They're on the bottom. Just drop the damn jig down to where the fish are. But suspended fish, in 100 to 300 fish, feet of water, yeah, those need a vertical braid, and Cortland needs to make that. So that is, one of the next 2 goals that we have as far as product development and the products that we need to introduce. So um, you had listed when we had chatted about online, like what any topics to avoid. I would say metered braid. I know we need to do it. It's coming. Give me, it's going to take a little time, and we'll get there.
Oh, yeah. And now to jump into something awesome. I know when we were talking, I was like, hey, you got to send me if there's any records or anything on Cortland Braid. You guys happen to have one of the incredible ones. You want to dive in and let them know what
Yeah.
was
So
caught on Cortland Braid?
you know, being in business since 1915, like there's some really good companies out there that probably have insane world records, like Andy. That company, I think they make mono and fluoro. Like Andy has insane records. Momoy, even though they're one of our biggest competitors in the hollow core space, like their mono, their IGFA mono, which is just a flawless, product. I told you I was going to be honest. I'm going to say there's competitors lines out there that are flawless. Momoy mono is great. They have a lot of records on their mono. I would doubt that Cortland. Now these records could be broken. Cortland's probably in there in the top 5 as far as most records ever set in the world record class with the products. But I mean, I'm dating back to 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Most recently, like I don't really know how they factor braid into the IGFA records other than just an all tackle record, right? So Cortland actually owns the all tackle. We don't own it. The guy that caught it, his name's Greg Meyerson. It's a great story. The guy's an absolute legend. He owns the all tackle world record striped bass world record, which I think is like 83 pounds or 88 pounds. It's something ridiculous. And he caught that on Cortland Master Braid. He actually caught that on Cortland Master Braid right around the time I started working at Cortland, a little bit before I took over pro staff and social media. He caught that. He's out of Connecticut. I think he's out of Niantic, Connecticut, somewhere in there. He actually invented a jig, or it's a weight system actually, and I think he used to work at a restaurant where they had live lobsters, and he realized these lobsters made like this clicking noise, and he could hear the clicking noise. I forget how he did it, but anyways, he found in the back alley, it was like a crack vial. Like a crackhead dropped a vial of crack and it made a clicking noise. I swear to God, this is a true story. And he figured out how to incorporate that into this this weight system or this plug. I forget what it is. It's like the rattle sinker or something like that. And it makes this noise that resembles like what a lobster would make. And I don't know if it's because these striped bass were eating lobsters, which when you look at an 80-pound, look it up, Google Greg Myerson world record striped bass. This thing is ridiculous. Like the way he's holding it, you're like, yeah, that thing could eat a lobster.
We'll pop it up on the screen.
So
It's
like
incredible.
how that came about, I could be wrong, but I believe that's a crazy story just to make up on my own right now. I believe that's how the story went down, and he was on Shark Tank, the TV show Shark Tank, and I think someone invested into that company. I haven't seen Greg fish since that day, so he obviously got a ton of dough for it, unless he's moved on to something bigger and better. So, anyways, that's one of the records. It's a cool story. Greg's an absolute legend. He's a super cool guy. There's a ton of other records out there. There's records on Cortland fly fishing products. We sell IGFA leader material. I think from 4-pound up to 20-pound. It was specifically built for fly fishing anglers to build into their leader system. That's part of the IGFA records. You have to have a break point of no more than 16 pounds or 20 pounds or whatever that line class record is, right? So that's what our IGFA leader material is made for. Is either you can use it for inshore, offshore saltwater if you think you can land a fish on 16, 20, 12, whatever it is. That's really why we came out with it, was for fly fishing class records. There's probably a bunch of other records out there, but I mean, to have the world record striped bass on Cortland Master Braid, I mean, that's probably, other than redfish, probably the highly most targeted saltwater species there is, just in the sense that, from North Carolina to Maine, there's that many people that live on the coast that target them. Redfish are plentiful from, New Jersey all the way down to Texas. So I would say striped bass, I mean, I could be wrong, but they got to be the number one or number two most highly sought after, most common saltwater species targeted. So to have that record, and a great, well-respected, good person in Greg Myerson having that record in Cortland Master Braid, it's pretty badass. And that was the OG Master Braid before we tweaked a little bit of it. Master Braid, when I first got to Cortland, has morphed and tweaked really in a positive direction to where we are today. So he caught
Perfect
that
time
on
to
me.
jump into it.
Yeah,
Master Braid today, baby.
So Master Braid is Cortland's solid braid. I know we just discussed hollow core a little bit, but that's our solid braid, right? That's your freshwater braid for bass, walleye, carp, trout fishing. We make it right down to 5-pound test. That's your inshore, offshore braid for, fluke, tog, albies, stripers, tuna, mahi, tilefish, swordfish, whatever. It's your all-purpose, all-around braid. We make it in 5-pound up through 200-pound and every size you can imagine in between. We sell it in those 5 main colors, 4 custom colors for dealers. Ton of different lengths: 150 yarders, 300 yarders, 15, 3,500, 5,000. So a million options there. So yeah, that solid braid is really like our go-to all-purpose, all-around braid for fresh and saltwater. It's extremely durable. It's long-lasting. It's fade and bleed resisting. I know I'd mentioned it earlier, but that's like, if you're a guide where it's like these clients are going to throw it in the freaking trees, they're going to throw it on docks. I want a braid that's I can just beat the shit out of for an entire season, and I'll worry about it next year. That's the braid that you're going to want to buy is Cortland Master Braid. If you're looking for just distance or just smoothness or just that's just not it. If you want to just absolutely hammer on fish, you never have to worry about breakage. You don't need to worry about abrasion resistance. The thing is just going to be there for you day in and day out. That's Cortland Master Braid. So that's kind of long and short of it. From a carrier perspective, I know that 8 carrier braid is really big right now across, a ton of brands. So ours is very unique in the sense that our 5 through 40 pound is a 4 carrier, our 50 and 65 is a 6, the 80 is an 8, the 130, and 200 is a 12 carrier braid. So why we do that and what separates that braid from everything else and what makes it unique is its purity. So we found the best deniers per size in each carrier and how to incorporate that into it. And that's how we came up with that structure. What Cortland doesn't do that a lot of other brands do, and I can't speak for everyone, but it is common in the manufacturing process, is a process called heat stretching. Spectra braid and super braids typically have about a 3% stretch rate, which is when you try to stretch braid, it doesn't stretch. Even though it's stretching probably 3%, it just doesn't stretch. Heat stretching essentially elongates your yield. So when you braid to, let's say, 5,500 yards, when you heat stretch it, you can get 6,000 yards, right? So you can take a 5,500 yard braid, heat stretch it out to 6,000, and essentially elongate your yield and end up with a lot more product. But what you do is you deplete the integrity of that line. Yeah, it looks good, it smells good, it tastes good, it feels good right out of the gate, but the longevity and the purity of that product is just not there because you beat it up. You beat it up to decrease your cost, you beat it up to increase your sales margin. Does it work out of the gate? Yeah, 100%. Does it work good? Yeah, it does, and then it slowly starts to deteriorate over time. It gets softer, it gets wind knots, and there's 100 other factors. Like Cortland Master Braid, and that's one of the things like C16, C12, and Cortland Master Braid is like, hey, I love your braid. I know it's made in America. It's a little more expensive and everything. That's a process that we don't do that might hinder us in terms of like cost and margin and to the customer's perspective. But what you're buying is a braid that's just as pure as it absolutely can get for longevity compared to everything else that's on the market. Yes, there's some other braids that might excel in certain aspects of certain fisheries, like I said, smoothness, slickness, distance, right? But when you're talking a braid that just lasts longer, that doesn't bleed, I don't want to say doesn't bleed, that resists bleeding, that resists fading, that just doesn't break, right? You're just not going to snap. Like the amount of times, the amount of miles of braid that I have sold in C16 Master Braid and C12 that have come back from my customers or even just general customers said, hey, this broke. I could count on one hand. And that's probably because it went around a lobster pot or crossed some other type of line, right? I don't have breakage issues with Cortland products. And that's a lot that has to do with that purity of the product that we have. We don't elongate our yield. It is what it is. But you can beat the shit out of it every single day and know that it's going to be there for you. And that's the advantages of fishing, Cortland C16, C12, and Master Braid. Dying braid, like bleed and fade. Like everyone that's listening to the show has probably had a braid that they're like, yeah, it faded after a little while, or it came off
It's
on my
fuzzy
hands.
and hairy and
Yeah, that's so that's I don't want to say that that's normal, but that's common. So in super braids, whether it's a Spectra braid, a Vectran, a Dyneema, all these different braid, super braid categories, right? They don't soak in dye like a cotton t-shirt or like Dacron. They don't soak in dye. So essentially what Cortland does and every other braid company does is how do we like get this color to stick to this braid that doesn't want to soak in anything? Spectra specifically because we make products with Spectra. They use Spectra fiber for bulletproof vests in the military, helmets in the military, right? If it could take a bullet, it's probably not going to soak in your shitty dye that you're trying to put into it. You know what I mean? So it's essentially
That's a
like
good
how
point.
do you get this braid to accept dye? And for lack of a better term, it's like a glue, right? I feel that Cortland's glue, it's a proprietary chemicals that we adhere dye to it. It's it's better than a lot of other processes that are out there on other braids, right? I'm not going to tell you that our braid doesn't bleed. There is a little shedding of color that comes off. Like I deal with tackle shops that spool our braid right off the bat. They're like, I get a little bit on my fingertips. That's normal. That's going to happen with every braid. That's just excess dye coming off. But if you're running a white center console 42-foot Freeman and the inside of your boat is moss green, that's bleed. You know what I mean? When you have reels that have dye coming off, like that's bleed. Fading is slight bleeding over time where you just don't see the bleed happening. Bleed and fade are the same thing. Bleeding is just gushing. Fading is just things that are happening over time, right? Cortland resists bleeding and it resists fading. I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't shed a little bit of color right out of the gate when you spool it. I'm not going to tell you that it's never going to fade. But if you compare our braid to almost every other braid out there, almost across every single color scheme you can think of, I promise you that ours will be in, the top 3 or the best across the board, regardless of what scenario you put that in, whether it's fresh or salt water, or whether it's on an electric reel, an LP, a spin reel, a conventional reel. We have a unique way that we process braid, and as far as the dyeing process, it adds a little bit of a stiffening agent. Like raw braid is very limp. Limp braid, when you cast it on a spin reel, will wind knock. It's going to go around that first ceramic insert, and it's not going to be able to keep up with the momentum based on the plug or the jig that you're throwing. So you have to have a little bit of a stiffener in there. Putting too much stiffener in there creates a lot of knots too. There's a lot of braids out there that are just complete wire out of the gate, and they feel like shit. They break in over time, and they do get better. They really do. But right out of the gate, you might have some issues. Like one of the things on our master braid boxes, it says consistently performs cast after cast. And I didn't come up with it. This old marketing guy that we shit canned years ago came up with it. But it was honestly a pretty good phrase, because master braid, from the day you spool it up to day 150, it's the same. There's no break-in period. It doesn't really get limp. That stiffening agent doesn't go away. When you start to see braid fade, typically that means whatever agent that they incorporated into that dye, into the braid, to also alter its characteristics, that's gone away too. So it's a weird process. Everyone has to do it. I have seen pre-dyed fibers out there. There's not a lot of them out there. I don't want to speak for everyone. There's manufacturers that might have a unique process that could watch the show in a week or two and be like, this guy's an idiot. That's not how it's done. I promise you that the bulk of it is done that way. And it's a difficult process to do. That's why it's year 2025 and braids still fade. If someone had figured it out at this point, everyone would have figured it out. But that's the nature of super braid fibers like Spectra, Vectran, Dyneema, and there's a handful of other ones kind of in the mix. They're durable. They don't stretch. They're badass, but they just don't want to accept dye or a fiber. So it's like, what do you have proprietary that you can do that makes that product better or better than somebody else's competition? And I feel like Cortland has that, or we're at least in that top, 2 or 3, braid companies that do offer that.
And is white like an undyed version of it?
So
or is it dyed white?
White is not, it doesn't incorporate dye, but it does incorporate what I call a finish or that agent that we put in it to make it cast. And that's the same for hollow core. You'd be like, why would you need to put a stiffening agent, or I call it a stiffening agent? The braid is so limp that it needs something, right? It's because the guys that fish topwater tuna with 30K, 20K, 18K, 14K reels, fishing hollow core on spin gear is not the most popular. But the dudes that are badass, that like do this day in and day out, that run and gun tuna fish, those guys fish hollow core. There's some hardcore dudes in Jersey and Cape Cod and Long Island, and that's just the territory I cover, right? The best of the best fish hollow core on their spin gear, and it's partially because they can direct splice fluoro leaders up inside of it with no loop-to-loop connection to a wind-on. There's no knot. Solid braid tends to get really kind of weird under extreme, tension. If you're fighting, a giant bluefin that's 450, what are you, 300 pounds for a long time, uh, hollow core tends to last a lot longer on those spin reels. I think it's essentially because it's hollow and it lays flat, like it packs flat as opposed to a solid braid that, is round. I don't know. It's science. I'm not a science guy, but there's reasons why hollow core can outperform solid braid in the top water tuna game, specifically on spin gear. Um, the only downfall to that is if they're not on top and you got to mark them and it's a jigging game, solid braid does cut through water better than hollow core in the jigging aspect. So solid braid is nice because you can do both. Hey, they're not on top, but I'm marking these fish at 100 feet. Let's jig them. Can you jig with hollow core? 110% you can. Does it fight through the current properly compared to solid braid? It's a little tricky. It's flat, so it's going to want to hang up in the current. You're going to see a bow in your line when you're jigging fish. Can you do it? Yeah, but man, for some reason, like those dudes that know how to catch topwater tuna, that are the real deal. Those guys are fishing Cortland C16. Your hardcore offshore trolling captains, tournament guys, those guys are fishing C16. If they're not, I don't know, they had their head up their ass or they've never heard of it. But they will get there eventually. They will graduate to Cortland C16. It is the premium hollow core in the world, along with their, fancy Spencer yacht, Viking boat, Tiagra reel, and Zach custom rod, and the fancy Top Shot. It's the best, man. And those guys that, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars in these tournaments and stuff, and you're not fishing the best. It's probably because I'm not doing my job and you don't know about it.
Oh yeah, I think White Marlin Open last year was north of like 55 grand to go all in. While we have hollow core up, I did have a question. One of my friends that's a giant bluefin fisherman reached out and was like, hey, if you can ask this, I would appreciate it. What kind of pressure are you suggesting that they line the reels with when they're doing hollow core? And is it similar to what you would use when you're lining a reel with solid braid?
So as far as pressure, like the actual percentage, I don't know. I've never spooled a conventional reel. That's what I rely on my tackle shops for. Um, the really good guys is under high tension. High tension plus wet packed would probably be a dual scenario where you're going to get the most amount of yardage on that reel wet packed under high tension. Spooling solid braid on conventional reels versus hollow core under tension. I don't know the differences between the two of those and the benefit from one or the other. I could just tell you that because hollow core lays flat because it's hollow under tension, um, it's gonna pack down much better and you're gonna get a ton more capacity. So that's typically why you're going to do that. The other reason is when you have your drag set super high in those conventional reels, if that is not packed properly, that braid is going to dig into
Like,
itself and you're going to
yep.
break the fish off and you're left with a giant mess. In some cases, you might that braid could cut down so far into the core of the reel that you would have to melt the braid off and completely start over from scratch. I've seen that happen before, not personally, but from shops. They're like, hey, check out this reel that was spooled at a different shop and showed up to ours to get done properly. So, yes, super high tension. What that tension rating is, couldn't tell you. Reach out to a tackle shop that does, spooling. Reach out to, Grand Slam, Custom Rod and Reel. There's shops, TW, Oceans East, tons of shops in Jersey, Fisherman's Headquarters, Fish Supply, Trophy Tackle in Long Island, like Goose Hummock, North Chatham, Fish Northeast. Like these dudes spool and a ton of other guys that I could go on and on. This is what these guys do. So if you have a spooling machine at home like an HD 140 from Triangle and you're not sure how to do that, just ask. Just tell the tackle shop, be like, dude, I have hollow core and I have this HD 140. What should I be doing? And hopefully they'll they'll tell you like you got to put some heat on that thing. This is the tension you need to set it at. But high tension plus wet pack is the best case scenario for the most capacity that you can get on a conventional reel, whether it's a 30, 50, 80, or 130. And it won't cut into itself when that drag is set super high on that initial bite. So I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. And do you
Tension,
have
go
any
ahead.
suggestions to people on like, hey, how can we keep this line performing perfectly for the longest amount of time possible? Are there any kind of special care instructions or washing instructions or
So
anything other than like, hey, don't hit a crab pot or drag it against
yeah,
cement?
that's those are your obvious ones, and that's gonna happen. And I have a lot of captains and pro staff and ambassador guys that are specifically fishing shorter and shorter top shots because the braid is so much more durable than the mono, especially after big giant fish. Right? You catch a big blue marlin and big tuna. I mean, you guys can probably answer this. Like,
Oh
how many
yeah, you're
times do you
cutting it
change
all
out your
off.
top shots? Right?
Once it's
So
stretched, it's stretched.
So if you're yeah, that's what mono is for. It's forgiveness. That's what mono is built for, right?
Wipes against the side of a fish,
So
it's
if you're
all
fishing
taken
like
up.
900 yards on a 130 plus 300 yards of top shot, and you're changing that out because of giant bluefin or marlin or whatever it is, it's like that's 300 yards every time. I have some shops in the Northeast that do 1,250 yards of 200-pound hollow on a 130 and 100 yards of top shot. And the reason they do that is one, when they need to change their top shot, it's only 100 yards, and two, that drag actually increases on conventional reels as it starts to get closer to the core of the spool, right? So, say you have your drag set at like, I don't know, let's say 30 pounds, right? When that fish takes with a full spool, when you get down close to that, the thing just, let's say it dumps your whole reel. When that drag gets down close to the core, it's not 30 anymore. To turn that reel is not 30 pounds of drag anymore. It's increased so much. So there's guys that want the most amount of capacity on their conventional reels. So when that fish dumps them deep into their backing, it doesn't change the drag as much. And you factor in a fish that goes left and right with water drag on top of a core getting small. Capacity is just, it's so essential in landing a fish and not landing a fish. Um, I honestly forgot what the hell your question was. I hope I answered that, but
Yeah, no problem. We're about to wrap it up. And that actually answered it perfectly. It was just about special care and longevity
sure.
on
So,
the reel. And one of the
okay,
things, like you were saying, going with shorter and shorter leader, we do a lot of wahoo fishing here. And one of the things that we found specifically helpful, especially when using deep divers, is we use reels that are only wrapped in braid, and we only use a 4 foot section of mono to a swivel, and it allows your deep diver to dive like twice as deep. There's no stretch, and we lose way less fish.
makes sense.
Um, and it just overall swims better because the rod's doing less action because it's not fighting the current with the stretch
Yep,
of the mono and
yep.
the extra diameter of the mono, and
I mean,
it's
so
worked out
to answer
tremendous
your
for us.
question, like as far as what anglers can do to prolong braid, like super braid, Dacron's different. Dacron, I sell a lot of 200-pound Dacron to the commercial bluefin tuna market in the Northeast and Prince Edward Island in Canada, Eastern Canada. It's an old school approach. There's a lot of guys that actually build a base with 200 Dacron on like 80s and 130s and then top it with hollow core to save a little money, which is totally cool. Dacron will soak and rot over time. Spectra, like I said, that builds bulletproof jackets, bulletproof helmets. It's not going to soak in braid, or sorry, soak in water and rot. It's just not. It can get salt packed, which is just salt over time drying on it, getting in there. Braid, especially Cortland braid, specifically hollow core. It's not what you're going to do. Like, let's say you guys are different. You're down south, right? Guys kind of end their season in the Northeast, typically Cape Cod, Massachusetts. October, November, the weather gets a little bit dicey. We had an epic bluefin tuna run in New Jersey that went right through Christmas time. That last time you get dumped on a fish and you spool up and you bring the fish in, like What are you going to dry out 800 yards of braid in your house? No, you're going to put the reel away in your garage, and it is what it is. You're gonna redo the top shot for the following year. I get that, but there's not much you can do, but there's not much you need to do. It is what it is. The braid is essentially bulletproof, right? It could get salt packed over 5, 6, 7 years of beating the crap out of it. More importantly, just take care of your reels. Get your reel serviced at your shops. Get your Pens, get your Ali Technos, get your Shimanos, get your Okumas. Get those serviced. The braid is fine, and get them re-top shot. If you are spending good money on braid, proper braid, which is Cortland braid, you'll be just fine. If you bring your reel to get serviced and get a new top shot at a tackle shop, and you've only had hollow core on there for like 1, 2, 3 years, and the shop's like, we're going to have to redo your whole hollow core, you're not buying Cortland. You're buying a product that isn't spliceable after a handful of big eyes, a handful of yellowfins, and a handful of bluefin or a marlin. What happens is that braid gets so drawn out and stretched. It sucks to splice to begin with, but you're not splicing it. The shop is. When you bring that product back to a shop to get a new top shot, the reason they need to do more hollow core or new hollow core is because they can't put a needle inside of it because it's garbage braid. Okay? It was okay to begin with, but they can't deal with it after that because it's been so stretched out and so drawn out. Okay? So if you're having to redo your hollow core every year or every other year or even every 3 years, and you're not purchasing Cortland, there's a red flag and an issue there. Like, unless you hit a boat or a line or a lobster pot, your braid, especially Cortland braid, at least 4 years. At least 4 years. Like, that's the idea of what you're paying for. It's like buying a good tire, right? You can buy some shit tire at Walmart, and it's like, yeah, it's great, works good. And after a year, you go get your car inspected. You're like, dude, there's no tread on your tire. You can buy a really nice tire, and after 3 years, there's still tread on it, right? Well, yeah, it costs more in the long run, but buying, braid every year, every other year, every 3 years, it just starts to add up. And I understand the initial cost. It's like anything. The initial cost to spend more money in the longevity, like conceptually, you're like, this isn't worth it. That's what C12 is for, right? But you're still going to get the longevity because it's a Cortland product in the way we make braid, and the way we don't cut corners, the way we don't heat stretch. So if you need to make that initial investment into hollow core, like that's your C12. But if you're having to get respooled in hollow core at your shop or personally, it's because the needle can't go inside of it, and they need to put fresh hollow core on there, which means you're going to spend double what you should have spent right out of the gate. So I hope that kind of makes sense in terms of like what you're buying in Cortland quality versus, some of the other brands out there. There's some okay hollow cores out there, but long and short of it, that's typically what happens. You can't put a needle in it. It doesn't last long. You should be getting at least 4 years out of your hollow core, with the exception of hitting a pot, hitting a boat, hitting a line, or something goofy.
And I think the old terminology is buy once, cry once. It's a lot better than buying every year, every 2 years, and so forth. And lastly, just wrapping this up, how can they get a hold of you if their shop doesn't have Cortland braid? How can they make sure that they can get a hold of this stuff?
Sure.
Is there any way that they can find out, hey, is this located near me? Do any shops have it? If they don't have it, how do customers and shops reach out to you specifically to find out more information on getting this product and getting trained up and getting it out there on the water? I know I'm a personal user of it. I've been on a lot of boats that rely on it, like MJ's. Those guys are out there killing it. One of the best teams in the world, and going out on their boat, I like take notes every time. I'm like, oh, I have to use this stuff. Like, if they're using it, like, it's for me. And Dante was the same way. And when we started this show, he was like, hey, one of the first people you need on here is Brooks. And he's going to tell you and the other listeners all the great stuff about Cortland. I've been friends with him for a while. And he's like, you have to use this personally, and everyone else that's serious about going out here and targeting these fish and making sure that they're capitalizing on all these opportunities needs to really take advantage of every opportunity you have. Offshore fishing is one of the hardest sports that you can possibly do, and there's so many factors that go into it. And by eliminating like an easy choice by having a quality built in the USA product that's like, hey, this is tried and true, it's tested, it's over 100 years of manufacturing experience to get to the product you are, versus like, hey, I bought this $20 thing on Amazon that someone rebranded 5 times and now they're selling as like, hey, we just started this a month ago, and you get what you get. Because the last
So
thing I want to do when I'm $1,000 into a fishing trip, or $2,000, or on some of these larger boats, you're $3,000, $4,000 in just fuel out there, 200 pounds of ice, $500 in bait, $100 in hooks, $1,000 in tackle. Why do you want to risk it with something that's
it's
so
it's a great point.
insignificantly different in price when it's such a critical part?
Yeah,
Like,
I think for and I hope I got my point across. The longevity of what you're paying for in Cortland products, specifically hollow core and the master braid, is longevity, right? Um, you just mentioned the bait and the fuel and the ice. Those things are consumables. Those come and go. What you spend in a year on bait and fuel and ice versus what you're going to spend in braid that should last you, like I said, 4+ in years. And if you're just a recreational fisherman from time to time and you catch a few tuna on one reel times a handful of reels, like that braid should last you insane amount of years. That's the point. So as far as like, you bring up Dante, like when I took over the pro staff, I got a spreadsheet of like 13 guys. Guess who was on it? Dante, right? 13 years ago, Dante was on that spreadsheet and there was notes of who Dante was. And it was a world surf casting champion. And I'm like, what the fuck is surf casting? I didn't even know what surf casting was. So, and Dante is a top angler on MJ's boat. The guy knows how to rig everything, right? He's not just an angler, but they put him in there because he's a beast. Look up MJ's winnings, okay?
yeah, their website, their page is incredible.
Those
It's like
those guys
you have
don't
to scroll 5 times.
they don't just they don't collect checks because someone's just putting their name on it. Those guys collect checks because they're fishing real deal shit and they know what they're doing, right? So,
Shout
um,
out to Mike Yako.
yeah, so dude's a legend. So, long and short of it, like, how do we find Cortland braid, right? You can research whatever Cortland products you want at cortlandline.com. Every product that we just went over, plus all the other stuff that we sell, is on cortlandline.com. Awesome website. The boys did a great job with it. There's a ton of information. There's spec charts, diameters, the whole deal on there. We are in every tackle shop we need to be, with the exception of a handful. I got some work cut out for me for some guys that need to come on board in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. In the Southeast, we do really well. A couple of the inside sales reps that I work with every day at the Cortland office are doing a damn good job. Florida, Texas, California, all over.
Shout out to Hatterell's, our local
Yeah,
shop.
Hadrils. Those guys are really big. I think they just brought in C12 this year. In fact, I saw their order staged on a shelf today when I was in the plant. Those guys are carrying full range of master braid, custom colors of master braid, and now C12. So if you're in that neck of the woods, they have it. But we're a very easy company to work with. We do a little bit of distribution through the Folsom Corporation, just a flawless group of guys that work super hard in the whole Folsom group. We are direct to our tackle shop type business. We're not so big that we just can't deal with the mom and pops. I have over 170 individual accounts that I manage personally. I would say 80 of those accounts probably do $1,000 to $2,000 a year in fly fishing stuff. And I have just as much time for them as I do for the guys that do 80, 90, 100, 120, 200 grand a year, right, in tackle shops. So if you think that there's a shop that like needs to bring in Cortland based on what I just described tonight, whether it's C12, C16, master braid, and they're not really sure how to go about it, you don't need to go through a distributor. You can go through Folsom, and we encourage you to do that if that's the route you want to take, because you're already a Folsom customer and you need rods and reels and everything else. But you can go direct. You can reach out to info@cortlandline.com and say, hey, I'm this tackle shop, or I'm this guy. I want you to get in this tackle shop. Well, this email immediately goes to the sales rep. They immediately reach out. Direct to I'd say direct to consumer. Direct to wholesale is extremely easy for us. We're not so big that we just can't deal with or manage the small shops. That's how Cortland started. Like I said, I'd say slightly less than half of the accounts I manage are super tiny shops. I know every single one of those guys by name. I know what they buy. I know when they're going to order. Like, it's April 1st coming up next week. My phone's going to ring off the hook for guys for opening day of trout season in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Vermont. I already
That
know.
used to be us.
I already know who's going to
Our
call.
fishing vests and
Yeah,
floppy
exactly. And
hats.
even the small seasonal
Licenses
shops.
on the back.
We're a seasonal area in the Northeast. Like, it's cold up here, right? There's shops that don't open up until like Jib's Bait and Tackle in Cape May, New Jersey. He doesn't open up till like March 1st. Well, a few years ago, I was calling that guy off the hook in January, February. I'm like, this guy hates me. Well, March, he picked up. I'm like, hey, Bobby, what's going on? He goes, I didn't open till today. Well, I learned that. So my point is that even if you're a seasonal shop, even if you're a small shop, even if you're a consumer of one of those, but you want them to look at or at least entertain the idea of Cortland, we're super easy to work with. I work with two of the other inside sales reps at the Cortland office. The other inside sales rep is just based in Florida. There's no shop too big, too small that we want to do business with. There's capacity there for us to do business with distribution wise. Folsom's been a great partner to us. We just started working with those guys in December of 24. Everything is online. You can call us on the 1-800 number, 607-756-2851, the direct line, info@cortlandline.com. You can send us a DM on Instagram, on Facebook. We have a ton of videos on YouTube. I'm a host of a podcast called Cortland Hook the Podcast. We have a new episode airing in the next week. There's a ton of ways to get a hold of us. I mean,
Is that on YouTube or
YouTube,
Apple? Where can people find
Spotify,
it?
Apple Podcasts, clips on Facebook, Instagram, a ton of stuff like that. So you send us an email and you say, hey, I saw this dude on Goin Deep, the podcast. I'm going to get forwarded that email and I'm going to answer the email. So like I said, we're a company. There's 30 employees in the plant, in the office. We're grateful to be where we're at in upstate New York, manufacturing in America. And there's no shop too small, too big. If you're just a general consumer, an average guy, and you want some more info on Cortland braid based on what you heard today, just send an email to info. The boys are going to send it right to me, and I'm going to reply directly to you.
Well, thank you very much for coming on here, Brooks. It was a pleasure. I really loved your insight into the line, and I look forward to chatting with you more in the future about the places you guys are going and updating you on catches. And if you ever need anything from us, certainly let us know. Thank you guys for tuning in. Next week, we have Captain Chase from Last Cast Charleston coming on to talk about wahoo and blackfin tuna fishing. So make sure to tune in. And I hope you have a great evening, Brooks. Take care and thank you again.
Thanks, guys.
Tight
Appreciate you
lines.
having
Thanks,
me.
bro.
Tight
Thank
lines,
you.
boys.